Hey, all right. So, hello YouTube. We are back. We're on Second Corinthians chapter 11. So let's get started. Normally what we like to do is we like to read like a section and then we break it down and then we read the next section and then we break it down and we just kind of keep that going like that. So if you would like to read, feel free to read. Okay. All right. So we have the first section, which is verse 1 to verse 15. Would anybody like to volunteer to read? You can read whatever translation you like or prefer. We like ESV, but if you prefer KJV or something else,
I could read it.
okay, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm reading CSB. You said 1 to 15, correct? Okay. I wish you would put up with a little foolishness from me. Yes, do put up with me, for I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy, because I have promised you in marriage to one husband to present a pure virgin to Christ.
Wait, said I,
Well,
sorry,
yes.
chapter 10. My bad, y'all. Chapter 10. I said 11.
Oh,
Yeah.
chapter 10. Got it. Okay.
I was like, oh,
Okay.
really good. I heard that. Okay, let's go.
Now I, Paul, myself, appeal to you by the meekness and gentleness of Christ. I, who am humble among you in person, but bold toward you when absent. I beg you that when I am present, I will not need to be bold with the confidence by which I plan to challenge certain people who think we are living according to the flesh. For although we live in the flesh, we do not wage war according to the flesh, since the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but are powerful through God for the demolition of strongholds. We demolish arguments and every proud thing that is raised up against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to obey Christ. And we are ready to punish any disobedience once your obedience is complete. Look at what is obvious. If anyone is confident that he belongs to Christ, let him remind himself of this. Just as he belongs to Christ, so do we. For if I boast a little too much about our authority, which the Lord gave for building you up and not for tearing you down, I will not be put to shame. I don't want to seem as though I am trying to terrify you with my letters, for it is said, his letters are weighty and powerful, but his physical presence is weak and his public speaking amounts to nothing. Let such a person consider this. What we are in our letters when we are absent, we will also be in our actions when we are present. For we don't dare classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves, but in measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves to themselves, they lack understanding. We, however, will not boast beyond measure, but according to the measure of the area of ministry that God has assigned to us, which reaches even to you. For we are not overextending ourselves as if we had not reached you, since we have come to you with the gospel of Christ.
You
We
can,
are not up there.
no, finish it off.
Oh, okay. We are not boasting beyond measure about other people's labors. On the contrary, we have the hope that as your faith increases, our area of ministry will be greatly enlarged.
You want,
Uh, okay, so that we may preach the gospel to the regions beyond you without boasting about what has already been done in someone else's area of ministry. So let the one who boasts boast in the Lord, for it is not the one commending himself who is approved, but the one the Lord commends.
period. Okay, so there was tea happening. There was so much tea. Okay, and just so you guys know, I've been told that the way that I like to do Bible studies is as Medea was doing a Bible study, okay? Because that's just kind of how I am. So I'm sorry about that in advance, okay? But there is so much drama happening right now, okay? And I love the fact that like all of this was kept in the Bible because it's funny how I think a lot of people don't go to church because they say they don't go to church for the people, right? And we will happily say, well, that's like saying, you don't go to the hospital because there's people that are sick. Like, no, you go to the hospital because you need to go to the hospital. It doesn't matter who else is there. It doesn't matter what they're doing. Like, you need that healing, right? You need to be treated, right? So we do that. But I think it's funny that even in the Bible and even with great men of God like Paul, he even had struggles within the church. And I feel like that is so human and so like real because I think we kind of see Peter and Paul and the disciples and Jesus as this like really big like pinnacle like people, like all these people that are just like they're better than us. When in reality they were human just like us. They were lowly. They started off as fishermen. Some of them were outcasts, like tax collectors, etc. So they were people. We're people. We go through things. They go through things, and that's what Paul is addressing here. So let's break it down. I'm reading an ESV. So, verse 1, it says, I, Paul, myself entreat you by the meekness and gentleness of Christ. I, who am humble when face to face with you, but bold toward you when I am away. I beg of you that when I am present, I may not have to show boldness with such confidence as I count on showing against some who suspect us of walking according to the flesh. So, Paul is quite literally defending himself here. And he's like, listen, I come to you with meekness and gentleness, right? A lot of people, I don't know if you guys have seen this on social media, people will say, like, oh, I wonder what Paul would write about the Church of the United States, right? Or like of America, or this church deserves a letter from Paul, et cetera, right? And I think it's funny because Paul's letting them know, hey, like in person, I'm chill. Like I'm super humble. I'm meek, I'm gentle, I'm calm, like I'm not very like loud in the way that I talk to you. And even they've admitted it as we continue, right? But he's letting them know, like, but when I'm away from you, I'm bold. So it's funny because like some people would see that as hypocrisy, right? And so he even says it here against some who suspect us walking according to the flesh, right? But he's like, no, that's not what it is. For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. So he's like, wait, no, this is not the point. The way that I'm talking to you guys and the way that I talk to you in person is the way that I need to talk to you, right? But in the same way, as I'm away, think about it like this. Sorry, I'm talking in circles, but get it like this. Have you ever seen kids that act really, really good when their parents are around? And then their parents leave and they're little demons? Have you ever seen that? They're like bite kids and they like to like open the fridge and you're like, no, yeah, I already told you were gonna wait, you were gonna eat, and they're like, I don't care. And they like get whatever they want. Like, have you seen some bad kids? Or maybe on TV you've seen bad kids, right? I feel like that was the church of the Corinthians, okay? Because they were probably good. They were probably fine when Paul was around, right? And they were probably doing what they had to do. They probably showed their best face forward. And now that Paul leaves and he's writing this letter to them, he's like, I'm hearing all this stuff about you that you're not doing all the things that you did while I was there. So I was gentle with you and I was meek with you while I'm with you. But now that I'm gone, you're acting different, And so I beg of you, Bert, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just think it's interesting because it's like almost like at the time when he sends the letters to them, they're acting up, right? So he's very forward and he's clear in his letters, right? Yeah. So he assumes that when he comes to see them again, they've already read the letters. He doesn't need to tell them again with that boldness because he's like, I'm hoping that you're mature enough to receive the words I already gave you, and I don't have to tell you. And it just goes to show how patient he is.
Yeah,
he's so patient, and he's like, but then he does call out those who are like trying to call him out.
Yeah,
and he's like, no, like if you call me out, like we could talk face to face. I could tell you these words that are written in person, face to face, if I have to. But I'd rather not. Like, I'd rather you listen when I send these letters.
Yeah, which is exactly what he says in verse 2. I beg of you that when I'm present, I may not have to show boldness with such confidence as I count on showing against some of you who suspect us walking according to the. So he's in the simplest terms. I hope that y'all get it.
Please get it.
Because I'm not trying to come to you with such boldness like I'm about to the ones that are like saying that I'm in the flesh, right? That's so crazy, right? And then he goes to say, for though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. And then it continues, being ready to punish every disobedience when your obedience is complete. I find this so interesting because I feel like a lot of the time we take this out of context, right? And we don't realize that he was saying this about people that were acting crazy. You know what I mean? Like when people think of themselves as higher, that's the flesh, right? Yeah. So he's saying here, listen, it's not that you're against me. It's not that I'm against you. What I'm against is that mentality, is that idea that you have that you're better than me and that I'm better than you, or that who am I to come and tell you? Who am I to bring correction to you, et cetera, yeah. Right? So that's in context. And correct me if I'm wrong. If any of you guys read it differently, that's perfectly fine. So he's saying, like, this is not against you and me. This is against here, right? This is against the pride we have here. So it's not that I'm fighting against you and this I don't like you as a person. No, there is a divine power. There is a stronghold that some of us have that causes us to see people that try to help us as people that are trying to hurt us, right? So some of us have received pain in our life, and we hold on to this pride of, no, but my pastor said this, and no, but the way that I live my life, the way that I was treated, the way that and we create these strongholds in our mind to where when someone wants to come and correct us, we're like, no, you're trying to come into my life and you're trying to gaslight me, or you're trying to do this to me, or this or that. And it's like, no. Like, whatever way you see the world is how you see the world. Does that make sense? Like, if you see everybody as bad, when somebody is good to you, you're going to ask, what is their intention? Because you do not understand or believe that there are people that could just be good to be good, right? So just because you don't understand something doesn't make it true, right? Or doesn't make it a lie in that case as well. So it's like here, he's saying, hey, we're destroying arguments and every lofty opinion against the knowledge of God. That's the point. That's what Paul is going to come and do, right? And he takes every thought captive to obey Christ. This is in the context, which I think is really, really good, because
usually never read it in context.
Usually,
so it's good.
You know, whenever you get like a bad thought, it'll be like, no, take that captive. And out of context, it makes sense too. This is a good way, a good thing that you can use if you're having negative self-talk, or if you have, like, you know, just the enemy comes into your mind and tells you lies, right? It's good to take it captive to the obedience of Christ. It is good to do that. But in context here, it's saying, hey, when there's beef between you and a brother or sister in Christ, you have to get that and squash it, because you are bringing it to the obedience of Christ. What does Christ say? We're one body.
Amen.
There's no partiality in the body of Christ.
That's so good.
Right?
That's so good. Because I feel like it's so easy to fall into the trap of the me versus them.
Yeah.
There's such a trap in that, and you find it in church, like in all churches everywhere, right? And people, it's easy to fall into this trap of, oh, why did the pastor have to say that? Or why did they have to tell me that? Or why this, why that? And we can take things personal, when if we step back and took a minute to think, do they have a point? Is the Lord trying to use them to get to me? Is the Lord trying to, like, is there a way that I'm thinking that is an error? Why am I getting so offended so quickly? What is this? Is this an insecurity? Am I insecure about something right now?
And that's the action of you taking it to the obedience of Christ. Because you being able to even acknowledge it lets you know that, hey, the Lord is working in me. Like, there's something that I need to change.
And sometimes it's hard to even get to that point, to get to the pause moment before you let your thoughts and your feelings rise up in you and create the tension, right? And create, like, they're my enemy, and, like, I don't know who they think they are. They don't know my whole life. But it's like, this is where we have to ask the Lord to help us to be humble and help us to stop, to wait, right? Because the Lord really is trying to work in us. And I've had moments where I've been called out, right? And
same,
in love, of course, right? Leaders, you know, you hope that they do it with tact and they do it in love, but that they are forward. Because if we aren't Christians who are able to be told or corrected, right, to be corrected, then we're going to be Christians who don't grow. And we live in a world, unfortunately, that is very much very emotion driven. So the moment you tell someone to stop the way that they're feeling and to look at the facts, it makes people feel kind of like, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? Right? And it's like, no, pause. Like, do we want to grow as Christians, or do we want to stay babies and get offended about everything? When there really is no offense, it's more because the Lord loves you so much. He wants to use others to call you out so that
to break down
grow.
those strongholds that you have ultimately. Amen. And I feel like every single one of us does have a stronghold, right? But it's saying here, but have divine power to destroy strongholds, right? Like, who destroys the strongholds? We do. We have to, right?
Our responsibility.
We destroy arguments. It's not that God's gonna swoop in and make everybody happy again. No. You have to take initiative for yourself,
your job.
And you have to destroy the arguments and every lofty opinion that comes against the knowledge of God, right? So if you know, what does that mean? If you know that God wants you to be in peace and to be peacemakers and to be in peace with all men, that means anybody. That's the knowledge of God. That's the understanding of what the Lord has told us already. So why do you think it's okay that your beef is justified by your own terms? Like, it's not, just because somebody treated you poorly, they hate you, they talk to you some kind of way. Yeah, they did that to Jesus too, and he still forgave them. So who are we to not do the same thing, right? So, and then it continues to say, being ready to punish every disobedience when your obedience is complete. That's kind of crazy. Like, does anybody have another version of that that's less clunky? Does anybody? I think, Sarai, you had one in your CSV version. Anyone? Anybody? No? Okay, fine. Yes, that's
Can
fine.
I point something out?
Yes, go ahead, Guru.
It says weapons. Who has weapons? Soldiers have weapons, right? So, and it ends being ready to punish. Is there some kind of like aggressiveness there? I would say yes, there is, right? So it's like, this is a very like intentional. We have to take these thoughts like they're how do you say it? Like the enemy, like scattering around and take these thoughts captive, right? Because if not, they're gonna destroy us, right? So it's like you have to be so intentional, because it really is those small thoughts, those small seeds that the enemy likes to put in people's minds to create division in the church, right? And when we have thoughts like that, it really does create how do you say it? Like discord and like the opposite of unity, right? And that's why the Lord literally words it like that, being ready to punish every disobedience, because it creates disobedience. Then you see people who group together who are like, I don't like how they do this at church. And then you have other people on the other side, I don't like how they do this. And you have separation in the church. There's no submission to order. Everybody has their own cliques of what they think the pastor should be doing, what leadership should be doing. And it's like, this creates so much disobedience, right? And even in households, right? Even in like families, right? So it's like we have to make sure that we're being obedient, because we want to be first and foremost obedient to the Lord and obedient to our leadership, right?
Yeah, I think it's also good that it says, and take every thought captive to obey Christ, right? Being ready to punish every disobedience, comma, when your obedience is complete. Going back to obey Christ. So if we let ourselves continue in disobedience, we're not going to be able to obey Christ. Because how? Like, how can you be disobedient and obedient at the same time? You can't. When your obedience is complete, that means disobedience is out. True. Like, it's out, right? It cancels itself out. Verse 7, look at what is before your eyes. If anyone is confident that he is Christ, let him remind himself that just as he is Christ, so also are we.
That's good.
So, you're a child of God. I am too. You know what I mean? And it's funny because people, that is so good. Hold on, let me highlight that. That is so good, because you know how many people will say that they're Christ and look at others from other churches, other denominations, other countries, and say that they're better? Or look at someone else and say, they're just a better Christian than me. What is a better Christian? No. Are you Christ or not? Yes or no?
you're
That's
part of
it.
the body or not.
It's not about ranking. You're not going to be ranked by how great of a Christian you are because you don't deserve heaven. None of us do. None of us are worthy of being able to even enter into the pearly gates of heaven. What makes us think that we would be better off or less great as another person? Yeah, some people might have a longer Christian life. Some people might be, like longer in the church or whatever. But that's so funny. Mm-hmm. Let him remind himself that just as he's Christ, so also are we. That is a bar. That is so good. Okay.
You can't hurt your own body.
You can't. It's one body at the end of the day. Yeah. For even if I boast a little too much of our authority, which the Lord gave for building you up and not for destroying you, I will not be ashamed. I do not want to appear to be frightening with you okay, so then he goes back, right? Mm-hmm. For even if I boast a little too much of our authority, which the Lord gave what? The authority for building up, right? And not for destroying. So Paul was given the authority to increase the church, like to build it up, right? Mm-hmm. I will not be ashamed. I do not want to appear to be frightening you with my letters, for they say his letters are weighty and strong, but his bodily presence is weak and his speech of no account. This is the things that people are saying about Paul. So he's not only letting them know, hey, I know that you're talking about me. He brought receipts. He's so funny, okay? He's like, listen, I have the authority. I have this authority from God to build the church up, not to break it down, right? Not to destroy you. Mm-hmm. But these are the things that you guys are saying. I don't want to appear as like scary. I don't want to appear as too intense for you. But this is what I'm hearing, that you're saying these things, right? Yeah. Verse 11. Let such a person understand that what we say by letter when absent, we do when present. Mm. So I'm the same. I keep the same energy, right? That's like a very big term now, or like phrase, right? Mm-hmm. The way that I am in message is the same way that I'm going to be when I see you, right? Mm-hmm. Not that we dare to classify or compare ourselves with some of those who are commending themselves. So that's to say, he's making it very clear. I'm not trying to boast like some of y'all are boasting. Yeah. That's not what I'm trying to do here, okay? But when they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves with one another, they're without understanding. It's blind leading the blind.
Oh, no.
Oh my goodness. That is why we need counsel. That is why we need leaders. Because if I go to Becca and I say, Becca, this is my problem. This is what's been happening. Mm-hmm. And me and her are talking. She's going to be like, girl, you right. Girl, you right. Girl, you right. Act like you would.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then it's like literally like
back blindly, and forth.
Blindly to the
and
blind.
I'll say this from personal experience. I talked to our pastor's wife like earlier last year, right? And for a while, right? Because I do want to clarify something here, right? Not that you can't find good counsel within your brothers and sisters, right? But you shouldn't just have one person that you go to for everything. Mm-hmm. And you should have older Christians, right? Older sisters in the church, the pastor's wife, right? Maybe the deacon's wife, older woman in your life who you can go to for advice and for wisdom. Because yes, you and your sister, like me and Joanna, we can help each other in some areas, and she can give me some advice in some areas of things maybe that she's already done, right? That maybe didn't work for her this way and did work for her this other way. And you can find good counsel amongst each other, right? The Lord can use, we're not saying the Lord can't use your brother or sister, right, but they can't be the only person you go to, especially for big decisions, for relationships, for jobs, for, right? There's so many things in our lives that sometimes we think, oh, but does that really matter if I ask for a counsel? Well, what if this job gives you a schedule that you no longer can go to church, right? And some of you might say, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't get myself in a situation like that. Well, the enemy, he's out there. He's getting people and he's pulling people's strings. And a lot of people isolate and they fall into these traps because they think they can do it all by themselves. They think they don't need to ask anyone for their opinion, because sometimes we are soft and we don't want to hear people tell us the opposite of what our hearts desires. But what do we know? Our hearts are deceitful. So we need older people in our lives.
That's lofty arguments. That's a lofty idea, right? Isolation is lofty. It's a haughty thing because you think you're better. You're too good to ask for help. right? And you might say, no, it's not that. It's just that, like, I think it's awkward, or maybe I don't want this person to see me like this, or I don't want to be embarrassed. That's pride. If you were humble, you would be able to say, you know what? I need correction. I do need correction. I need help. I don't know what I'm doing all the time, and that's humility.
That is.
But if we're humble, that means that we're going to go to people. But if we decide, oh no, I'm good, or I don't need anybody else, I already have this one leader that I hold on to, that I tell everything to. Hey, you need Jesus. We all need Jesus. They need Jesus. So like, and Paul is telling us here, right? They compare themselves with one another there without understanding. Okay, continue. But we will not boast beyond. I'm going to let that marinate in here. Okay, continue. But we will not boast beyond limits, but we'll boast only with regard to the area of influence God assigned to us to reach even you. For we are not overextending ourselves as though we did not reach you. For we were the first to come all the way to you with the gospel of Christ. We do not boast beyond limit in the labors of others, but our hope is that as your faith increases, our area of influence among you may be greatly enlarged, so that we may preach the gospel in lands beyond you without boasting of work already done in another area of influence. Let the one who boasts boast in the Lord. For it is not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends. Every single one of us has a jurisdiction, right? Every single one of us has been given something that we can steward, right? And we're not sitting here boasting saying, oh yeah, well, I did all of this and I was able to reach this person, and I was able to proselyte this person. They used to not go to church and now they do. Or I used to be able to do, like, yeah, you can admit to that, like, oh yeah, I found them, and you're testifying of the Lord's goodness, of how the Lord gave you the boldness to talk to that person. But it's not because of you that they came to Christ, right? God sent you as an instrument to go and get that person, right? So it's not that we're boasting about how great we are and da-da-da-da. No, it's, you know what, in the Lord's like faithfulness and mercy, he put me in the right place at the right time, and I was able to talk to somebody, and they were able to finally come to church, and this happened, and you're boasting in the goodness of God, right? And so here he's talking about, like, I'm not boasting about what Rebecca did, because I didn't do what Rebecca did, right? And I'm not trying to overextend myself and make myself seem better than her, or to look as if I did what she did and take the credit away from her. Because it doesn't matter how somebody came to Christ, right? It's the fact that they were able to be saved that matters. So it's like he is telling them, listen, yes, I'm able to boast. I can, because we were the ones that came all this way, and we were the first ones to tell you about the good news. Like we were the first ones to do that. But the plan isn't to stay here. The plan is to continue reaching lands that are beyond you, right? So what does that mean for us? Every single one of us should be bold in Christ in whatever way you can possibly be, right? At work, a lot of people are going to tell you, you shouldn't talk about religion, you shouldn't be this or that. But like, newsflash, every single one of us here is a Christian that seeks God, that loves God. So yeah, you might not outwardly say, oh, Jesus, you need Jesus or whatever, right? But in the way that you walk, in the way that you talk, you are talking about Christ. Like, you are moving in a way that Christ wants us to move, or we should, you know what I mean? And then in that way, like, we're able to preach to others, not just the ones that go to church and not just the ones that you've maybe talked to before, but to others and to many more people, and ultimately, it ends to say, for it's not the one who commends himself who is approved, right? But the one whom the Lord commends. So if you're faithful in the little, the Lord is going to continue giving you more, right? If we look at the parable of the talents, the one that received the 10 talents multiplied that. So then what happened to the one that didn't have the talent, or that had the one talent and he put it in the ground? That was taken from him and given to the one that had 10. So he was given even more to then continue to multiply, because he was found trustworthy in the things that God had given him, or his master had given him, right? So like, what has the Lord given you to labor in? What is it that you have done and continue to do now that can reach other people in Christ? And how are we going to do that this year? Like, how else are you going to continue doing that and then being faithful in the Lord in the process? Does that make sense, or did I totally like shoot in the dark there?
No,
I could be totally wrong.
It made sense. It made sense.
No,
I was gonna say, I like how like you look at this last section, right, of this chapter, and how before he started talking about the way he boasts and the influence, he mentioned briefly those who were like basically boasting about each other and comparing each other, and at the end how like they didn't have understanding. So they were like doing it for their own selfish like ambition to like kind of like make it a point that they were doing God's work and they had power and they had authority. But it's like Paul is showing here that when you're genuine and you truly want to do God's will, you will hear God's instruction and you will do whatever it is. If God's telling you to just disciple one sister at the church and be there for someone, like you will take that seriously and you will do what you have to do. And the awesome thing is that God gives you the understanding you need and the understand like for that sister and the words of encouragement that you need for that sister and the things that you need to pour into this person, right? So the Lord gives you these things, and when you do it, right, and you like learn to practice discipleship and love, right, and sharing the gospel, and it's real, then you see the sister like grow in the Lord, and then now you see her pouring into other sisters at the church, and like you see the ripple effect of how the Lord used you, and now the Lord using that person, and that's the goal. The goal isn't to keep it for ourselves, right? And the goal isn't because we're trying to boast about how much God uses us, but the goal always is to get other people saved and other people pouring into other people, right? And it's like, and the awesome thing, it's like I like how he says in verse 15, we do not boast beyond limit in the labors of others, but our hope is that as your faith increases, our area of influence among you may be greatly enlarged. So the point is influence, right? Influence of the gospel and the gospel being shared. And there is no competition because there's so many people who still haven't heard the gospel. There's so many areas that still haven't even been reached, right? So it's like it's so silly to like try to like you see a sister dealing with someone else and like try to go and be like, what's this about? Like, how can I help? How can I like pray? And like kind of like try to put yourself in people's situations, even though maybe the Lord didn't call you to be there. And it's silly to do that when there's just so many others that the Lord might be calling you to. So it's just being sensitive to the spirit and being just normal. There's no competition. It's goofy.
Just be normal.
Be normal. Like be humble. Like, Lord, where do you want me to go?
Yeah.
What's next?
And
then
so
just
good.
being committed and consistent with whatever he asks you to do.
That was good. I like that. Okay, so that was chapter 10.
Question.
That was chapter 10. I'm sorry. Yes. Good studies. Okay. Nice. All right. So, does anybody have anything they want to add before we close off on YouTube? Okay, no. All right. So we're gonna go ahead and end YouTube. Bye, everybody. See you guys later.